They claim that our eyes will just be created a slightly different from what they are. We talk, we see things that are normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. Allison's on her phone, not paying attention.
Oh, sorry. I'm back.
Focus, Allison.
Sorry.
This is going to be a continuation of my talk with Caleb. As I mentioned at the end of last episode, in part 2, he tells some other stories. He's got some more recordings that he did, some like on-site stuff he did when he was in the Ozarks. But he gets into these experiments that he was doing with artwork and the paranormal. Pretty interesting stuff, and there's some recordings associated with that as well. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and walk right back into the second part of my talk with Caleb.
So, yeah, last time we talked, or like when I'm emailing you, that was kind of the end of that story until like about a month and a half ago, maybe. And I don't think I wrote you about this. So at my job, I designed T-shirts. Well, I did. I actually left today for another job starting tomorrow. But, I work in a office, and it's a large screen printing shop. So part of my job is to design T-shirts and then build proofs and then work with the screen printing department to basically, to make sure everything's printing accurately, all that stuff. And we had a pretty tight-knit team. I was the creative director, and then there was an art director who kind of did more administrative stuff. And then she and I, we kind of worked back, literally like with our backs to each other, and we would do approvals, like reviews, like we kind of managed everything together. And then especially being, we would do printing primarily for the tourism industry and for like events and stuff like that. And we don't have a very big art department. So things can get really intense, especially the beginning of the year when a lot of businesses are ramping up for like the spring and summer and stuff like that. It's like when you get really flush with orders. And among other things, like my coworker and I, she and I kind of became like brothers in arms in a sense. Where like, tackle everything together. And so you kind of, you get in stressful situations, and so you get to know everyone like pretty intimately and get really comfortable with them. For example, we had this moment where I was working on this drawing on my computer, and I heard her say my name, and I like kind of said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And it was quiet, and I turned around, and she's just looking over my shoulder at me, or over her shoulder, and I was like, "What do you want?" And she's like, "I didn't say your name." And I was like, "Oh, I thought I heard you." And she's like, "I thought your name."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. So, and there's other people in the room who saw that go down. So that was fun to have witnesses. So she came to me. She lives pretty much just a hop, skip, and a jump away. Like we always run into each other when we drive to work. So she kind of lives in the same neighborhood, just on the other side of this busy road. And her side of the neighborhood, I've always gotten weird feelings. The area I live in Kansas City I moved up here after I got married because my wife lived in this area, and we're really close to the river and like right on the bluffs of the Missouri River. And basically in the wintertime, I can see Kansas City, Missouri, which I live in. And then across the river, I can see downtown Kansas City, Kansas, like right on the state line, right on the river, just about. But I've always kind of had weird feelings about our space. I've heard things about people saying it was like a Indian, like sacred grounds, but I don't know, it's just a bunch of people, neighbors talking about things that, might have been here hundreds of years ago. So I kind of take all that with a pinch of salt, but it's strangely hilly, and kind of an interesting area because it is so forested. Like we have a lady fox down the street who's got a den, a very large herd of deer running through the area. We have turkeys, and I'm like 3 miles from downtown Kansas City. And it's this weird little haven nobody knows about. So anyways, coming back to my coworker, she kind of turned to me and was like, "Hey, listen, I have to ask you, I want to get your opinion on something that's not work related." And it's like, okay. And so she goes on to tell me that when her and her boyfriend moved into this apartment that they have, it's just a house that they rent out. They have over the last year been seeing like basically shadow people. Like they will see people come and go out of their vision, more or less, off the side. She said she saw somebody like come up behind her car when she was backing out of her driveway to go to work, and she thought she hit them, ran out, and like nobody was there. She's had it where she'll, be opening a door and the door will pull shut, and then she has to reopen it again, like pull itself out of her hands, basically. And she lost both of her parents within a week of each other during COVID, so she's still obviously grappling with that, mm-hmm. But she has a lot of her parents' stuff. And she said that basically what made her want to talk to me was that like the other night she found her mom's coat that had been in storage, buried basically in storage in their garage. It's like either in her boyfriend's music studio or like close to it, shoved into a shelf, and not just like kind of thrown up and like tucked in, but like hard packed and like a spot that she wouldn't notice it because it's normally where her cat sits. And she was like, "I don't know what to do about this. It's starting to get really creepy." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." And so, I kind of just like, well, like these things, I kind of feel like, when people talk about they want attention, and that's kind of where the stuff is coming from. And like the anecdote time and time again is that like you just kind of sternly but politely ask it to leave you alone. Sure. And then you just kind of stop, ignore it and stop taking it so seriously and giving it the time of day, and it'll just peter off. And she was like, "Okay." I was like, "I know it sounds like nothing, but it's like, honestly, this is what I just keep hearing." Mm-hmm. This is what I keep hearing and reading. And it's just, so it's got to have weight to it.
Yeah. Every now and then I'll get like a mom or something that'll write me like, "Oh, this is really bothering me and my kids, and, I want it to stop. What do I do?" And that's the first thing I say. Just politely but firmly say, "Hey, you're scaring us. Please stop. We don't want this." It's incredibly effective.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's just like, yeah, just do that. When you see it, say it, it's like, just make sure you're polite. Apparently that's, yeah, you want to be respectful. So, that was that. Went back to work. And so, it doesn't feel silly because it goes back to Hellier a little bit. Sometimes I can start to hyper focus on things. And so a lot of times, I'll just watch stuff over and over again. And since Hellier was a very unique show, I kind of just started just watching it a lot, just almost as a weird habit of noise. Mm-hmm. And so I was watching it while I was going to bed, basically on my phone, and I fell asleep. And I didn't. It was one of those things where I didn't I felt like I half fell asleep, but it was, I guess it was, you say I fell asleep, I don't know. But I'm sure the show was affecting my dreams to a degree because I started dreaming that I was in a cave. And the funny thing is that I was the 2-word entity. Not seeing it this time, I was embodied by it. Using my strong thumbs to climb up a wall to a hatch that was in the top of the cave. In this dream, I'm climbing the wall and I push open this hatch, and the hatch opens up into a basement, and it's a very clean, just nondescript basement. The only the floors are spotless concrete. There's just a water heater to my right side, and in front of me is one of the walls, and the wall has a giant 4-paneled window in it, and I can see outside. It's this kind of Oregon coast, Pacific West Coast, or Northwestern coast, forest, real lush, green, wet. And I'm kind of familiar with my like in the stream, I realize, oh, I'm in my coworker's basement, and I'm aware of like the cardinal direction. So I'm like, okay, I'm facing southeast, like northwest is behind me. And I start walking towards the window, and instead of the window opening up, like the whole wall just swings open like it's basically like a door, like to the southeast. And the thought immediately like pops in my head, like, oh crap, that's where we're coming in from. And then I just immediately wake up. And so I was just like, well, that was weird. And it was like, like, what do you expect? Like, I had this conversation, I'm listening to something about caves, like, of course, like, and then, still have this weird experience that has like been kind of affecting me. It's like, write it off. And so I got to work the next morning, and I started thinking about, I was like, maybe I should tell Haley about it. Like, I had this crazy dream where I crawled through a cave as a giant bird into your basement, and I found out where the ghost or the shadow people are coming from. And so I was like, screw it, whatever. And so I told her this story, and she immediately pulled up Google Maps and looked at her house. And she was like, yeah, this is the side of the house everything's been happening on. She's like, this is where her boyfriend's studio is. This is where the driveway is. And it was all on the southeast side of the house.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And we kind of just like looked at each other and was like, whoa, dude, this is crazy. And then basically just had to get back to work. And okay, we don't have time to ruminate on this right now. And I even like told her like kind of the layout of the basement. Now, her house doesn't have a basement, but it's like kind of like a very tall crawl space. And she was like, yeah, that's where the water heater would be. Like everything. Like, yeah, I was just like, wow, and I, even though I live close to her, I've never been to her house or anything like that. And so, yeah, that was kind of just like this weird thing. It's like, wow, strange event. And then, of course, like being embodied as that entity was also very weird. She did tell her boyfriend about it, but she left out the part where I was a big bird. Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of that whole long saga for that. Yeah, I'll say that kind of going on to like the next section if you wanted stuff Tim might like.
Yeah, I definitely want the stuff Tim might like.
I figured you might. Especially because after listening to your show for a lot. So I actually heard about the show through last podcast.
Okay.
And I started listening to an episode where you're interviewing the guy who did the What Happened at Braley Pond podcast. Got distracted by that and then didn't revisit your show for like a year. And then I've just been like catching up with the catalog for this entire time. And so one of the funny things that I will say is, and I don't, I know that like some people talk about the paranormal being like infectious in a sense, like kind of like the Skinwalker Ranch stuff where people were scared to talk to people about it because it would draw attention outside of the ranch and stuff like that. But kind of one of the funny things is that like you have talked about, like, I really enjoy the on-site recordings. They're very fun and satisfying to listen to. But you kind of talk about like the lights, in the woods and stuff like that. And so I have basically started seeing something I've kind of feel like has close to what you've described before, sometimes I should say, where I have been noticing like in my neighborhood every once in a while, and it's normally when I'm out by myself, flashing lights in the trees. And not like I know what a lightning bug looks like. I know what colors they are. These are like strobe cubes going off in between the leaves. Like I haven't seen any orbs or moving lights like that, but probably like the biggest thing was last summer when my friends and we went down to the Ozark area and stayed in this cabin, kind of like the northern part of the Ozark Mountains, right before you get into Arkansas. And I had been listening to your show for a while, and I was like, the Ozarks have their fair share of folklore. With like the Ozark Howler, Momo, and I was like, like kind of like in Bigfoot country. And it's just like, I should just kind of keep my wits about me, like, and just kind of observe things. And so we were down in this area. I can't remember the name of the town, but we stayed in this cabin off of the Jack's Fork River, and there's 6 of us, and like this was probably the time where I really started noticing like the flashing lights. And I think I sent you the recording where like I even have one, like it was one of those things where we were watching late at night it was during like the Perseid meteor shower.
Mm-hmm.
So of course we're out in the boonies, there's no light pollution, it's the perfect time to see a meteor shower. But like I am noticing that I'm seeing stuff like shooting off in the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm aware of how vision works and how the mind works and even how blood pressure can affect vision. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I really want to bring this up because it could just be me, like my eyes kind of glitching out or whatever. And then I sent you the recording of one of my friends just going, did someone turn on a flashlight over here? Because I just saw a big bright flash over here. And I had forgotten about it, but when I was like trying to pull the audio through this recording, yeah, I found where I had heard knocks in the trees. And this is one of the things where I don't know how well the audio will come through because I was editing it on headphones. I tried listening. Whenever I edit stuff, I try to listen to my car because I figure if I can hear it while in my car, it'll sound good anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of like, I don't know how well this works out. So if it's like something you can't pick up on, I'm not going to be offended if you don't think it'll translate well at all or anything.
So this is like a 2-minute clip. What else is in here?
And then we got owls, and owls making, it sounds like one of them got eaten. I don't know. There's like a weird monkey warble sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found where we were talking about hearing a growl, and I was kind of able to pull it out, but that's one of those things where I'm just not sure how well it's going to translate. But yeah, one of my friends is saying like I'm kind of hearing as grumbling sound.
Okay, and this is all at that same cabin?
This is all within the same hour at this cabin, yeah.
I'll go ahead and play that then.
You guys hear that? Yeah.
Thank you. Who's got a lighter on? I do. Oh. Wait, a what? A lighter? No, I think somebody have a light on? No. Oh, I felt like it was a bright light over here.
Okay, yeah, I saw a bright light over there too. Like, not too long ago. It was a quick flash.
Is your phone still working down here?
Yeah.
Really? You get Verizon? Ooh. Amazing. What is that? What is it? I don't know, there's some noise coming back from the cabin area.
There's like a weird grunt.
Maybe?
That's someone's stomach.
Is it your stomach?
There's someone's stomach crumble. I heard something from over to, that way. My right. You hear that?
Nope.
Like, woo, woo.
There's like 3 knocks in there, and I thought it was something breaking, but kind of re-listening to it, I don't know, you can't hear like much of a thud. You just kind of hear like tuck, tuck, tuck.
Mm-hmm. Did you hear those live, or did you just pick them up on the recording?
No, I heard them live. I actually forgot about it until I started revisiting the recording.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Also, I find like knocks and like breaks they sound really different on recording versus live.
Yes. Yep.
Like I always give the example of the tree that literally sounded like it exploded in Michaud.
Mm-hmm.
Right around midnight. I was walking down the forest road, and Chad was behind me, probably 30, 40 yards. And then this thing just goes crack right in front of me. And it was like a shotgun going off. I mean, it was massively loud. And so excited to get home and listen to the recording. And then on the recording, it's just like crack.
Just a little boop.
Yeah. So unimpressive. And it's like, there's no way I can translate that to people. Like, no, you have to believe me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like one of those things where like I'll listen to this stuff and like my first thing is like, I'll go upstairs and like tell my wife like, oh, dude, listen to this. It's like and she's just gonna listen to me like, it sounds just like what, I don't hear it.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, never mind.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I don't really share a lot of this with people. But yeah, so I heard the pops and I thought it was something breaking at the time. Like you can hear me in the recording. They're like, did you guys hear that? And then we start hearing owls. Now, I like you always kind of give the caveat, like you're in the woods, it's nighttime, you're going to hear owls. I have a app that kind of like identifies bird calls. And so we actually listening to like, we started hearing the trill of a screech owl. And then there's like a barred owl. And the recording I gave you is very short. We were actually listening to this this going on all night.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear it, like the owls kind of like trilling, the screech owl trilling, and then you just almost hear like, like the sound like when a howler monkey kind of like starts to amp up to like do you just gotta hear like really loud, and then it just sounds like something got eaten. And it's one of those things like birds like make a lot of weird noises, obviously. Like I don't know if an owl got something or if it got attacked by what, but it was weird. Never heard anything like that before.
Yeah, I've heard of it, and then I was actually walking by myself without my recorder. I was doing for exercise. I was like just wanted to go on a hike. It's like a Sunday afternoon. I was just gonna like power through and just do a few miles just for exercise. So I was really moving. Didn't even take a recorder with me. And I hear this great horned owl do the who cooks for you thing. I was like, oh, that's cool. That was really close. And then right after that, he just goes into that crazy like monkey thing where it's just like,
oh, okay.
And it was crazy sounding. And it was right beside me. And I was like, the one time I don't have my recorder. I recorded him doing the who cooked for you thing in Hex Hollow like any number of times. And then this time he just went ape scat. And I'm like, the one time I don't have my recorder with me.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just kind of crazy. We were just like, you can kind of hear us all get quiet. We're like, what was that?
Yeah. It's impressive when they go off.
Yeah, like I said, like I don't know if that was like related to any of the weird stuff. Like definitely like the lights or anything, because we are in the woods. But it was definitely really cool.
Yeah, whenever I find owls, I just put them in because owls, right? And most of the time they're probably super. Yeah, they're just owls, but I always like throw them in just to like note, hey, there were owls, there was weird stuff happening. Make of this what you will. Yeah,
so, and then a lot of this stuff, like, honestly, I had, like, kind of forgotten about. Like, I knew about the owls, and, like, I knew at one point, I had mentioned something about seeing the flashing lights, and so, yeah, I was literally, it's like a 2-hour recording of just, like, laying out and talking, like, having the dumbest conversations, and I was just kind of, like, flipping through, and, like, it's like, oh, this happened, like, oh, this happened, like... I was like, okay, I am just gonna send him like this chopped up stuff, and because like seeing the lights, like especially after that trip, like I we'll see the lights periodically.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like I said, like it's not orbs, but it is like someone's just setting off a flash bulb in foliage. It happens a lot. Like part of me questions a little bit, especially like in my neighborhood, because like a lot of times I'll see it when I go running in the morning and I'm done with the run and I'm sitting on my driveway kind of stretching, and like I'll just be looking up at the night sky basically, and I will be seeing it. And the thing that just I question whether or not it's actually like sight flares, whatever light flares from like blood pressure, is like the fact that it does interact with the environment. And then the other thing that kind of has my interest about that as well is last summer after a run, I was just drinking water, like stretching in my driveway, and I live on top of a big hill that kind of dips down and then goes up to another big hill. Like our hills are so steep that when we have snow, like the plows sometimes cannot get up our hill. Like even the big trucks, I've seen them start to slide down our hill. And anyway, so I'm looking down the hill and at the street lights, and I noticed this bat flying around. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to videotape this and show it to my son. And so I'm standing there, like, kind of filming this light or this bat flying around. Probably 5 o'clock in the morning. I live at more or less like I live in at a cul-de-sac, and then you go down the hill to the left. There's another road that ends in a cul-de-sac behind our house, and then it comes to this weird like 5-way intersection. So I have a perfect view of the intersection, and I can see when there's cars coming, when there's not cars coming. And I was showing this video to my coworkers, and I'm noticing, and it's like faint, but there is a strange, like, did you ever see Hereditary?
I don't think so.
Okay. When they like kind of have like the moments where the entities kind of like interacting with people, it's almost like a light reflection, like kind of like off your phone or whatever, but it like will grow out and like kind of create this weird little line in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it was like something like that, or it almost looked like light reflecting off of something. But basically, and I do live right by the downtown airport too, so we have a lot of air traffic. But there's nothing flying overhead, no cars coming, and there's this strange light that it's basically like light reflections with no center light. You can see it at the top of the trees, like near the top of the trees at the top of the hill, and it comes down and you see it reflecting off all the trees. And then by the end of the video, you kind of see it reflecting off a bush at the very base of my property. And it is the weirdest thing. I've showed it to friends who are like, there's a car coming. And it's like, dude, no. You would hear it in there. I don't know. But I kind of feel like it looks weird enough to me. Like there's, and I of course, the people that are into the stuff are the one, they're the ones that are like, wow, this is so strange. And of course, the skeptics are like, oh, I'm sure there's a car or something that you can't see. Yeah.
I think that's the way with this stuff. I mean, I truly don't think we're ever going to have, well, now with AI, I think video evidence is out the window. But
oh yeah,
let's say there wasn't AI, I still don't think we're ever going to have anything that's so convincing that it would be 100%. I think any video evidence you get, it's almost like any evidence you get, it's always like enough room for doubt. And that's the nature of this stuff. It's always going to be like enough where if you're a believer, you're like, that's it. That's the thing. And if you're a skeptic, you go, no, it's not. Like, here, let me punch 10 holes in that. I think that's just the way of this stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of like that's the thing I learned real fast and hard. When I would like, my friends ask me like, how is to stay at the haunted house? I'm like, listen to this recording. And they're like, dude, one of you was in the room. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, you can hear us downstairs. And it's like, well, they weren't in the house. They don't know what the layout is.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. It'll always be that way. I mean, but I think especially with video, I mean, it's, the Patterson-Gimlin thing is my favorite example. It's like you can get experts to line up on both sides of that thing. Mm-hmm. From film experts to special effects experts, you name it. Creature locomotive experts locomotion experts that know how things move. They'll line up on both sides and they'll be like, and these are like top people in the field on both sides said, yes, it's real, no, it's fake. And we still don't have the original film. It's like somewhere lost to time. So it's the whole thing is hilarious and perfectly emblematic of video and the paranormal.
Yeah. I appreciate it and that that stuff exists. Then the fact that people question it because like you do want to know what you're actually experiencing.
Soraya asked me, I was telling him about the fireball I saw in Indiana, and he's like, did you film it? I was like, didn't even think about it. Not for a second. Yeah. And if I did, I don't think I would have ever seen it again. It would have probably, we saw it twice. It dropped behind the tree and then popped up on the other side of the field. I think if we'd have tried to film it the first time, we'd have never seen it again. And if we did happen to catch it on film, it wouldn't have looked like what we saw. And we'd be telling people, no, but it's like, this isn't a good example. Like, it really looked like this. I don't believe it can happen with this stuff. I don't think it's meant to be filmed.
Even the kind of with filming and light stuff like that. Years ago, we had a really bad storm blow through Kansas City, and I was driving to the airport to pick up my friend. And at the time, I lived south of downtown and south of the airport, and it was one of those storms where like down trees, like pretty bad. And I'm driving up, and I'm seeing this black haze on the horizon. And I'm like, oh man, is that another like storm front? Like that is dark. Like, oh, this is gonna be a long night. And as I'm getting closer, like the wind's not changing anything. And I get to downtown, and I'm starting to cross the bridge. The city's cut in half by the Missouri River. So I go from the south side of the city to the north side over the bridge, and I realize that is not a cloud. That is a plume of smoke. And I'm getting closer and closer. I mean, like, I have traveled probably 10 miles, and the smoke's just getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, okay, something big is on fire over here. And get close to the airport, and there is basically lightning struck a jet fuel storage container.
Wow.
And lit it on fire. And I mean, this was like this giant explosive, just plumes of fire. It was so strong and so hot that like they literally the fire department could only just monitor that the fire wasn't spreading.
Wow.
They had to let it like burn itself out, and it took like I think 2 or 3 days for that to happen.
Jeez.
Yeah, so you can imagine how big this fire is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm on the highway with some of my friends, picking up our friend at the airport. We pull over, and like, granted, this is like when phone cameras were like still becoming a thing, but it's still, you would think you could photograph a giant burning fuel fire. Like, it looked like a little dot. It's like in every photograph we took. So it's just kind of like, yeah, I get it. Like, you could have like the brightest, best photographic evidence, and like, or like the thing right in front of you, and like it's just not going to turn out like a little ball of light versus like a giant industrial accident,
right?
Burning in the middle of the night. Yeah, which is like kind of one of those things that like surprised me about that video, is that like it is faint, but you can definitely see the thing wiggling down. But a lot of this stuff I've kind of done started following the philosophy that you kind of talk about, where it's like, well, this is just for me.
Yeah.
And
I don't know what any of this stuff is, but I do believe it's part of human experience. I think we've been experiencing it forever. Our ancestors talked about it, as far back as we can have records. But what it's there for, other than to tell us there's maybe something more in the world's, there's a little bit more to the world than, what we can touch. And other than that, I don't exactly know why. I think I tend to fall more on the meaning side than just like, oh, it's just there to mess with us,
Right. Yeah.
It feels meaningful, it feels important, right, when it happens. But beyond that, who can say?
Yeah.
Well, it's a good time to get into this artwork. So explain what you're trying to do. And you wrote to me about this before, and I thought it was a really interesting idea. So you're sort of playing with art and the paranormal, yes?
Yeah, basically wanting to investigate more, but just, also having other responsibilities. I've been like following a lot of paranormal stuff. I don't want to say paranormal studies, but, reading like John Keel, and like just listening to people's stories and experiences and kind of their ideas. And even kind of like listening to, starting to get into the idea of magic, not necessarily being a practitioner of magic, but just kind of listening to people talk about rituals and intent and like the power those things have. I kind of started having this idea where it's like, okay, well, like art making is like an act of creation. It is an expulsion of energy and drawing out, basically drawing something out of nothing in a sense.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a lot of these interactions like seem to be, I know people talk about, the idea that's like we get scared because it's easier to get, attention that way. And so it seems to like want like a sense of like energy or like focus, like to be willed or whatever. And so I kind of started like having this idea. It's like, well, okay, I want to like experimenting sounds very like laissez-faire and like almost irresponsible, but I want to see if I can have a little bit of like a controlled interaction in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of linking this idea of like art creation and like focus, kind of be like, okay. And then like basically, for me, like going back to my little souvenir from the Sally house, like what was the one thing that I like could like to myself be like, I had no control over this was audio.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you've said before, like you can record this stuff left and right. So it's like, okay, there's something to sound. And so, talking about the ghost box, like I've been like slowly like just fiddling basically. I hate to call it paranormal theory, but basically paranormal theory, like what are these elements, these like constants, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was kind of like, okay, I kind of came up with this idea. It's like, well, what if I work on a painting or a drawing, whatever, and I provide a medium of interaction, so white noise or noise of some sort, and I state that a welcoming of interaction through noise, and offer up basically like I'm going to be focusing on creating something like that is within the themes or like I was focusing on like liminal things like bridges, spaces of transition, even between two colors of lights and stuff like that. So it's like I am looking at the in-between places, focusing on creating images dedicated to this so you can use that energy to make something happen over the radio. That's kind of like a fairly innocent little experiment. I'm not asking for something to come knocking on my doors, and let's just see what happens. So I kind of did the first setup, and I don't have a ghost box. I don't have any of that stuff. I do have an old radio receiver. So I was like, well, I just want to take it out. I took it out of the container, turned it on to AM channel. That's just try to get it as staticky as possible, and just initially started listening to like see if I would pick something up, and that was just awful. Just listening to static and working. So I was like, put on headphones, and it's just I will readdress this later. So first recording, I say what I want. It's like just give me something over the radio. Use my energy from creation to mold sound into something. Yeah, and so I do this for about an hour, and the funny thing is that I have ADD, so the whole concentration thing can be real difficult. Yeah, so I get this audio file. I get about an hour's worth of just like noise and me painting, and I'm kind of going through it, just looking, for anything talking about looking at signals and stuff like that. Nothing's really there. You can just see little blips and blops of me, like my paintbrush hitting stuff and me shuffling around. And then at the very end of it, it's that car sound where it sounds like a car's going down the cul-de-sac, and I can hear music. And at least I think I'm hearing music. Mm-hmm. And it's like, great. Someone went home late, down the street, and it got picked up, and it's just the radio, whatever. But then the more I would listen to it, I was like, it's not actually like, again, like with the Doppler effect and with like just I know what a car going down the street with the radio sounds like, and this sounds like someone humming, like just a simple little tune. And the more I listened to it, I was like, no, sounds like something's humming a tune. Interesting. And it was kind of one of those, like again, I got my souvenirs, like, yes, I got a jackpot. Like this is it.
Yeah, well, let me go ahead and play that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I hear it. It's
yeah, you hear it?
Yeah. Kind of have to listen through the static and the noise, but yeah, I hear it.
Yeah. And so then it kind of became one of those things. It's like, okay, well, what do I do with it? And so I just decided, like, I kind of want to start, like, that was so successful, like right off the bat, first hit. And I had kind of basically surrendered myself to the idea that like there's not necessarily like epiphany or like broader evidence or truth to any of this, because like what we talked about earlier, like there's always going to be somebody who can describe why it's fake.
Right. Sure.
And so then it's kind of like, that doesn't matter. I'm not out to prove anything. So let's just experience this, experience it, and like just start documenting. Initially, I was like kind of scientific about it, but as I've gone on, I've been working on it for about a year now. Just kind of been like, no, this is just documenting experiences, and like anything that weird does happen, like my ideas are to like make it available to listen to, but not like say what it is or what it isn't, but just like literally kind of just make it using art, one, to elicit these events, and then two, using art to kind of just communicate experiencing them without having to convince someone that it's real. I've been working on it pretty much almost consistently for a year now, and I've kind of just decided this is like where the body of work goes. Like I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm tired of working in series and coming up with concepts. I'm like, this is like the thing I've been fascinated with for a long time. So this is it.
It's really, really interesting. Like the whole concept is very, very interesting.
Yeah, and it's been weird because there has been times where, gosh, like, so probably most of the time not much happens, to be honest.
As with all this stuff. That's
yeah. And I basically was like, yep, I'm expecting this. But then like what's really crazy is, so one of the ways I can, I supplement income is obviously doing commissions and stuff like that. And I don't like doing it, but for people that I do, like I will do pet portraits and stuff like that. But my caveat is I'm going to make it interesting for me. So what you get is what you get.
Yeah. That's kind of the kind of commissions I do.
Yeah. And so I was working on a painting. Basically, my friend's my wife's high school friend commissioned me to do a portrait of their cat that had passed away that was like very special to her husband. And it was this. She'd never commissioned art before, but she had liked some of the stuff I had posted on Instagram, and like I've known her for a long time. And so she was like, this would be a really special gift to him. Would you want to do it? And I was like, of course, yeah, I'd happily do that. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I wonder if I can elicit reactions like just by working. So like all this time I've been like trying to focus on like, spaces of liminality, like things related to the paranormal, and not making it so obtuse with like, overtly creepy, but just like really trying to get like the spirit of environment in a sense. And I was kind of like, well, I want to keep doing this, but I have to get this thing done by Christmas. So let's just see what happens. So I've been working on the painting off and on for a couple of weeks, and I decide that like I have like a night where I can really crank it out, really work on it. I don't have to work the next morning. Everyone went to bed early. And so turn on the radio, and I've been thinking about the things I'd ask, where I just say, I just want something. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to say what I want to hear. So I say, I want to hear this signal like altered. Like it doesn't have to be a voice. I just want a noticeable change. I haven't changed the dial on this radio. I mean, granted, I found out that the noises changed with like, it sits on the same table as my computer stuff. So like whenever I use my drawing tablet, like I can hear the feedback or interference over the radio. So, and so I kind of know what these like little shifts are. And so I'm working on this painting, and I work on it for like, honestly, like almost 2.5 hours straight. Like, those moments when you're like working on a project, you just like hit that zone where like,
oh yeah,
I finish it that night. Like it is done. And I was not anticipating it, but it was just, I hit the space where everything was working together. I knew exactly what to do. It was just so organic and awesome and just really fun and gratifying. And I was like, so pleased and sit down and listen to the recording. I was like, surely something must have happened, right? And it's just static, but it's like static. And then there's just these weird like warbles, whatever. And it's like, the sounds are really cool, but I kind of just blew it off like, okay, well, it's just interference or another signal coming in. And then I thought about it more, and it's like, well, the sounds, like the audio in of itself is interesting enough. I would like to play with it. So I opened up the file and I'm looking at like the waveforms and everything of it. And all of a sudden I realized that probably about the time that like when I really started getting into the painting, literally the signal changes. There's like a repeating pattern with these like radio blasts. This time I had been like reading a little bit about like magical thinking, and I was like, still kind of like skeptical about it. But then I was like, well, wait, I literally asked for this to happen, and this is the most obvious that something has happened that I've asked. Like it literally did what I wanted it to do, very obviously.
Let me go ahead and play that one.
Yeah.
That low tone that kind of shifts under it's really interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of what caught my attention to it, because it's like so mechanical sounding.
So as you're doing this, as you're doing the painting, you can hear the radio. You kind of just have it on no station.
I have it on no station, but I am wearing headphones because whenever I try to like listen for it, that whine sound is in every tone is in every recording, and it is so piercing sometimes.
So you're listening to something else.
Yeah, I'm listening. Okay. I'm listening to like podcasts or music.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I don't really like focus on what's happening. And then the other thing that caught my attention too is like that blast sound. Like that has not come back at all since I've done this, and still have the same high pitched tone, whatever. But like that was the only time I've heard it. And yeah, it's you look at the wave file and you can just see like the monotone line, and then it almost looks like Morse code the way the pattern pops up. It's really strange.
Yeah.
And then I'd say like probably the last one that I really got something with was this January. So whenever I've done a lot of these recordings or like messing with audio, my studio, we have a chimney that runs from our basement to the top of to the second floor. So we have a chimney in the basement and a chimney or a fireplace in the basement and fireplace in the second floor. And on the other side is our TV, and that's where we, have our family hangout area. And a lot of times, and this happens with like eye exhaustion, where you start seeing, your vision distorts a little bit because you've exhausted your vision. And a lot of times when I would be, sitting on my computer listening to static for a couple of hours, trying to draw out whatever like minute noises I'm thinking I'm hearing every time I take my headphones off. This has been happening for years. Like I would hear what sounds like somebody watching TV on the other side of the chimney, on the other side of the wall, and it's a stone chimney, and so it's like that kind of muffled like TV like sound. And so I always just thought it was like literally audio pareidolia, that like I've exhausted my hearing, and I'm just, the silence, I'm hearing my blood vessels, the blood running through my veins, and my brain's making it in voices, whatever. But then going through your catalog, hearing people talking about like the muffled voices and like a man and a woman like talking. And I think you even discussed like experiencing this phenomena where you're hearing voices and they're muffled and it sounds like a dialogue, but you can't hear what they're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, other people are hearing this, it's probably still just like audio exhaustion. But so the last one, most recent one I did, I basically said, okay, we've affected like I've heard you change signals, other noises. I want to hear a voice. And it was a quick session. I worked for like 30 minutes because I was really exhausted, and went through, I started revisiting the audio, and there was like one little blurb in the recording where I thought I was hearing something, but like, of course it's static. So I'm like looking at like the waveforms, the volume levels of like the frequencies, and then like while it's playing in my ears. But I like just keep feeling like there's just like one spot I'm feeling like I'm hearing voices, and I'm thinking to myself like, it is an AM station, so it's gonna be a lot of talk. I know, radio waves are particle waves, so they can be affected by weather, wind, all that stuff. But it was like I'm only hearing it in one spot, in like the dead center of the recording. So I start messing with the audio, and I'm able to like literally pull out like almost in the middle of the recording. So it'd probably be like as I'm working, like I'd say when I'm most like focused on what I'm doing. Like if you look at like, concentration as like a sine wave, like in the middle of it's going to be where you're at your height for the most part. And that's kind of like where timeline wise this would be, because every time I put the recorder down, I state what I'm doing. And I say, I'm putting the recorder down, I'm gonna go work, and you can hear me shuffle off and start working, and then I shuffle back and whatever. And then this one was really hard to pull out, but that little bubble, I was able to, I don't know, there's weird voices, and it sounds like a man and a woman, and at least to me anyways. This was probably one where I really did have to do a lot of editing, basically kind of rebuilding high and low tones. But it's like there, and it almost sounds conversational, but then at the same time, like their inflections to me sound very almost, how do I put it? It sounds like a voice that's pretending to have a conversation.
Okay, let me play it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I told the story on the Flowered Path, on a Patreon episode of the Flowered Path.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shrine. It's called the Lourdes Shrine in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and I went there one day, just on a whim. I just thought I'm going to go there. So it's a beautiful place. They have tons of like statues and shrines and stuff to pray at, and it's awesome. And I just I'm going to go there today, right? So it's about a hour and 10-minute drive or something from my place. So off I went, and I showed up at the place. Long drive. I had to use the restroom, so you have to walk through the gift shop, and there wasn't a lot of cars there, but it was kind of during the week, and I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I didn't think anything of it. I walked through the gift shop, and these ladies, the two ladies working there, turn and look at me, and they're like, "How'd you get here?" And I said, well, I drove up the mountain. There's one road in. You just have to drive up a mountain to get to the place. As I drove up the mountain, they said, "That's impossible. A tree's fallen across the road. No one can get here." And I said, "Well, I'm here." So that was interesting. But for the first time in the history of ever going to this place, I had the whole place to myself. Usually it's a roadside shrine, so people will they'll be driving from one place to another. They'll stop. Some people will go there purposely as a pilgrimage, etc. It's never super crowded, but there's usually people there. This is the first time I've ever been there alone. I would not record if there were people there, but I was there alone. And there's this area where this stream comes in and like fills this pool, and I was like, I'm going to record that water. And I just held my recorder up to it, and I'm recording this water as it flows into this pool from the stream. Didn't think anything of it, just like, oh, that's neat, and made a couple other recordings, and then just sort of like started walking around and visiting the different shrines and so forth. And people started filtering in after a while, So I stopped recording. I had no interest in recording. It's a private place. I have no interest in doing that. But I went home and I listened to it, and in that water, you can hear a woman's voice. It reminds me of your recording there. It's behind the water, but it's there, and you can totally. And I can't tell what she's saying, but you can hear this woman's voice talking behind the water. It's really, really interesting. But it reminds me of that clip, in that it's like you can't tell what she's saying, but you can tell she's speaking. Like that.
It's there, yeah. Yeah, it was one of those things like make sure that other people that I can tell other people here. Like I had to really dig it out, but it was like kind of just listening to back and forth. It's like I know it's in there. Like you can, if you know what to listen for, you can just hear it, and it's really really strange.
Yeah, it's very very cool. So I have some ideas for your experiment here. This would have to be done probably with, say, 3 or more artists in the same place, right? Mm-hmm. And you could do variants of this experiment. And you probably have to have like a digital radio, so you could all be sure to be tuned to the same channel, the same white noise channel, right? Mm-hmm. Separate yourselves, either by miles or just in different rooms or whatever, and kind of do the experiment. Do it a couple of different ways. Do it, just simultaneously. Everybody's recording what's coming over their radio. Mm-hmm. Everybody's painting not an agreed upon subject, and then just see what the art looks like that everybody decide to do, and B, see what happens when multiple people are doing this, and if you're getting different things for each artist. And then another way I would do it is like the ESP test. Now have 4 or 5 different subjects that they could pick from, and they could do that, and then just vary it like that, and just play with this as an experiment over time. Now I know you'd have to find other artists willing to do this, but I think there'd be something there. You could almost do it almost like an SD session kind of thing with it, where you're sort of varying, changing the variables and seeing what happens as you change these things with different artists. I think it'd be worth trying if you could find people to do it.
Well, the good thing is I was a GTA when I was getting my master's, and so I know a lot of artists.
It'll be really cool. It'll be a really cool experiment. I mean, you could do it long distance too, but you'd either have to like have one radio that you're pumping, sending that signal out to everybody somehow. You need that constant. Yeah, which is possible. You could do it with people out of state that way. But I think it would be easier, just the easiest way to do it would be like buy 3 cheap, digital transistor radios kind of thing. Tune them all to whatever the channel it is. Because, digitally you can dial it in, make sure it's the same one. And then just kind of play with it like that. I think there's something to this. And I feel like, if we want to talk about liminal states, I think maybe being in that creative place, when you talk about you get lost in it, which is one of my favorite things. It's very close to meditation, I think. Yeah. I've done it with music. I've done it with visual art, where you get in the zone and it's fantastic. And I think that in itself might be a liminal space. So I think you're onto something with this. And I think you should push it and try different ways of doing it.
Yeah, no, that is a really great suggestion. I really like that a lot. I am going to do that.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to see what you come up with.
Yeah.
Caleb, thanks so much for sharing all your stories with us. I liked them all, but I'm really excited about this art experiment you're doing. I think there's something to it.
Yeah, thanks for listening to me. I appreciate the ideas and the feedback. It's great.
Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons, who I want to thank right now, as I thank every episode. Thank you, patrons. Thank you for your help. Thank you for everything you do to support Strange Familiars. If you like Strange Familiars and you want to help us make more content and get extra content besides, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Allison, what do our patrons get?
Love.
Lots of love. We do love our patrons. They also get commercial-free versions of the weekly episode and full extra episodes every month. We do at least one patron episode exclusive for our patrons. Sometimes we do more. I was trying to do more last month, and I just didn't get to it. But
May flew by, though.
May was a blink of the eye.
Blink. It's my favorite month of the year, and that's why it goes by so fast.
But we always do at least one patron episode. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars if you want to check out the options there. There's also option via Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe. It's called Patron of the Strange. If you sign up via Apple Podcasts, you also get the commercial-free weekly shows and the bonus episodes monthly. And once again, I'd like to thank all of our patrons, no matter where they're supporting us. So we're not doing a second Curiosity of the Week this week because it's the second episode, and we already did a Curiosity of the Week, and it's not Curiosities of the Week.
Yeah.
It's Curiosity of the Week. You can check out, if it hasn't sold already, the Swamp Root Almanac that we mentioned last episode at our Etsy shop. You can check out our other wares at Etsy. Our shop name is Lost Grave, but if you type in Strange Familiars, our stuff will come up. Besides the Curiosities of the Week, there's Strange Familiars t-shirts and stickers and artwork and prints and old photos and ephemera and more. Just check out everything we have because it's awesome. And it's a great way to support us and help us with Strange Familiars. Next week, Allison,
Yes.
I'm going to be talking with Randy. And Randy has this really interesting story about an entity that he felt was kind of negative. I mean, let's be realistic. The entity was negative. Like, it was doing some pretty bad stuff that was in his mother's house. And he reached out to Brother Richard for advice and for help. Brother Richard gave him some things to do, and he was on the Strange Familiars Discord, and said we were pulling for him, and everyone agreed that they would, in whatever fashion they were, pray for him or send positive vibes or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But his mom wasn't Catholic, and she didn't want like an exorcism or a Catholic priest coming to the house. So Brother Richard gave him some things to do which, weren't specifically Catholic, right? Which he felt very much helped. It's a really interesting story. It's basically this creepy pale crawler / rake thing that they were seeing. Is really weird. It's scary, but it ends on a good note. But then there's this little twist that he told me at the end, which Brother Richard didn't know. Brother Richard didn't hear about. So I sent Brother Richard the interview and said, hey, listen to this. And he got to hear it. He remembered Randy, but he never heard the outcome. And this is really kind of cool surprise at the end of the interview. So I talked to Brother Richard, and he does some commentary on the episode. He talks about that a bit. So next week's episode will be Randy, and then I will put that commentary with Brother Richard at the end of the episode as well. Then I recorded a whole other episode with Brother Richard, which will follow in the following week. So I know Brother Richard's a favorite for everybody, and we haven't had him on in a while, so I'm excited for that. We got some Brother Richard content coming up in the next couple episodes. All right, that's it for this episode of Strange Familiars. Just a reminder, we will be at Mount Bethel Cemetery in Columbia, Pennsylvania on June 15th. That's a Saturday. Selling our wares, signing books. Come hang out with us and Mr. Octavian from Strange Dominions. And we'll be back soon with more Strange Familiars. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/strangefamiliars. There's a Strange Familiars group there called the Strange Familiars Gathering you can join. We're on Instagram @strangefamiliars, one word, no underscore. And you can always find us on the web at strangefamiliars.com.
Evergreen as the ivy, O Lord of justice, O come to thy house, for thy body lies bleeding and scattered, as a seed to the harvest. Thou art brief, thou art gone. Flowers I lay by the window will die without water and wither away, but the voice of my love is forever. As a seed to the harvest, thou art brief. the form of my body and to death convey. But I lay in the wings of the darkness, without fear in the pyre, because I am green. Osiris, evergreen as the ivy, O Lord of justice, O come to thy house.